Welcome back, everyone. As the winter season presses on, many Canadians are hunkering down inside during the freezing cold temperatures. But with unsafe conditions in shelters and encampments, many others have nowhere to go.
Well, winter services plans are in motion for cities across the country. The situation is being described as frustrating and deadly. Here to talk to us about the realities of winter homelessness is outreach worker Lorraine Lam. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, what does a winter plan involve? And more importantly, why are Canadian cities facing so much backlash for what they've come up with for these plans?
Yeah, I mean, a plan in theory is well executed, well thought out, well resourced. So a winter plan in theory should recognize the need for unhoused people in the winter who need extra supports and extra shelter beds. The criticism comes because winter plans, especially in Toronto, are released quite late in the fall season. So it's already cold, it's inadequate, and it's arbitrary. So in Toronto, it's only considered cold enough to activate warming centers when it's -5, but people get hypothermia in 0-degree weather. So plans are very poorly planned.
Yeah, and let's talk about the City of Toronto's plan, because they've opened, they want to open up TTC buses to act as overnight shelters. Many are calling this logistical and rights nightmare. What do you think about this idea?
I'm going to reflect back. Buses as shelters.
I know.
So this is not a plan, and if this was a plan, it's a terrible plan. There's so many questions about this. Accessibility, there's no food, no water, no bathrooms. How do you lie down? Are we expecting transit workers to staff the buses?
Yep.
We're spending in Toronto $1.6 million on security guards at Union Station. Why not put that money into actual solutions instead?
Oh, good answer. Yeah, I agree. So last month, Edmonton City Council declared an emergency on housing and homelessness, and Toronto declared an emergency earlier last year. But there's criticism that these declarations, and lots of cities are doing it, are kind of like, way to go, you said it. Now what? Like, is it just symbolic?
Yeah, so acknowledgements, I think, are a first step in recognizing we have a crisis, but frankly, they're pretty meaningless without action. So Canada has declared Truth and Reconciliation Day, but there are still reserves without clean drinking water. So we've declared homelessness as an emergency, and yet we don't see more housing. We see not enough shelter beds. We see social assistance rates as completely unlivable. Instead, we see police displacing people. You know, during COVID, when it was an emergency, we saw the government's act quickly. We haven't seen that with homelessness. And the median lifespan for a homeless man is 55 years old and 42 for a homeless woman. Wow. So this is a public health emergency. And frankly, I'm pretty tired of meaningless declarations if it's not actually backed by action.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so last year, the Saskatoon Fire Department reported more than 30 fires in tents or homeless encampments, some of which resulted in deaths. What's your reaction to fire hazards contributing to the rise of encampment evictions?
Yeah, so I think we need to recognize that tents are honestly the only option for some people. I mean, we just talked about buses being shelters.
Yeah.
So people are doing what they can to survive. In Toronto, I know some folks who sleep in bus shelters, but in Toronto City Centre, one of the councillors removed the bus shelter, so even these options are not available. So tents are honestly what people use in order to survive, find respite from the elements. You know, if I would frankly say that freezing to death is quite unsafe as well. So people are starting fires to keep warm. So if we are worried about fire safety, implement fire safety tools. Fire extinguishers, fire blankets, education. You know, stoves in our apartments catch on fire and we don't ban cooking, but instead we implement tools, right?
So true.
And so I think what we need to consider about encampments is, well, people are at risk and they're doing what they can to survive. And so we need to stop weaponizing safety as a way of displacing people.
And we've seen plenty of times on the news, these encampments everybody being evicted. What happens when those evictions occur?
So there's a lot of money spent on policing. So for folks who are paying attention in Toronto, Bellwood spent nearly $1 million in police officers just to clear people from one park, and most people ended up in a different park because there's no housing. People's belongings are thrown away. So everyone's kind donations to poor people, they just get thrown away by the city when encampments are cleared. And so the Federal Advocate of Housing just released a report on encampments to say that these are actually systemic realities that we need to address, and we need to address encampments with a human rights approach, and displacing encampments is not the way.
If you could implement something tomorrow, or a couple of things tomorrow, you were in charge, what would you do?
I would use a lot of the funding spent on policing and security and actually invest it into housing. The solution for homelessness is housing, not police officers. So I'll name that Shelters are not the solution, but we have so many people who are stuck in shelters because there's no housing to move into. And so the other next thing I would do is definitely expropriate land right away and build affordable housing immediately so that people have safe places to go.
What about us? What can we be doing? Can we prioritize winter donations?
Yeah, I often say that donations are a Band-Aid. Donations sometimes give us the illusion that we're doing something, but we can't donate our way out of a crisis. And so what we really need is, if you're donating something, pair that with a call to your counselor to say this matters. We need to create a system where people are not relying on donations, but people don't need donations in the first place. We don't need to bring more donations of food to a food bank. We need to eradicate the need of reliance on food banks. People don't fall through the cracks. We have systems that push people over the edge. And so we need to do better collectively to actually create a world where we don't need to rely on donations, but people have access to what they need.
Yeah, and what would you say to the people, because there are people out there who are not sensitive to the homeless and they see it as an eyesore. They don't want those people in their neighborhood or near their park because this is where their children play. What would you say to those people about what the crisis that is happening across this country?
You know, most people are closer to being homeless than they are being millionaires, so this really could happen to any of us. And I frankly would say the people who are upset about encampments also don't want shelters on their street and also don't want food programs and also don't want harm reduction programs. So truthfully, where do you want people to go? And you know, I think there's often a nervousness around safety, but frankly, most of the folks that I work with are very protective of children. They don't even swear around children because children are like sanctity. So this fear around, oh my gosh, what about our kids? This could maybe be an invitation to teach our children compassion, don't we think? To teach our children about, this is an opportunity to teach us collectively, this is what happens when systems fail and how we can respond as a collective society to be better humans. And I would say that we all have a responsibility to play in that. And I'll name that sometimes these narratives come out of a place of fear of the unknown, fear of, oh, we don't know how people might respond. And I think fear is okay, but I think how we choose to respond from that place of fear really dictates our humanity.
Lorraine, thank you so much for being here and for your incredible insights. Absolutely amazing. Hey there, what did you think? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find more on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. See you soon.